Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Stowaways, Chapter 7. That afternoon, Jake saw lots of activity from his vantage point. A squad of Bajorans came out of the cloaked compound and onto a round, sandy, level spot on the far side of the rip. Jake thought that once, before the rock slides had choked the canyon, the sandy spot probably had been a seasonal pool like the ones they'd seen earlier. Jake had been studying the landscape, and he had concluded that the Turnaways had done some clever engineering. During the rainy season, torrents of water would come pouring down the rip. The rock slides would hold some of it back. They made a partial dam that would look natural from the air, as if part of the ravine walls had simply collapsed. But the Turnaways must have triggered the slides because they served another purpose. They would direct the floods of water to the deep channel cut through the Turnaway camp. Jake could imagine the canyon in flood season with foaming brown water pouring through the narrow opening between the rock slides. From there, the water would gush into the artificial channel, and then the center of the camp would have a sort of canal through it. At the lower end, presumably, the canal opened out again into the ravine. All this would help the Turnaways. After all, an enemy might reason it would be impossible to establish a permanent camp in the path of an annual flood. Now Jake wished he had a pair of binoculars. He could see the distant Bajorans on the sandy, round field going through some kind of exercises. He guessed they were learning personal combat skills, but he was too far away to see any details. A smaller group, some distance from the first, was obviously undergoing target practice. Jake saw the beams of phaser fire and the puffs of vapor where they struck the cliffside, where targets must have been set up. It was just too far for him to see anything clearly, though. Suddenly, someone laid a hand on Jake's shoulder. He jerked with alarm, and then he saw it was only Nog. "You scared me half to death," Jake whispered. "What's wrong?"
"Nothing,"
Nog said, grinning with his sharp teeth.
"I got bored, that's all. What's going on?"
Jake nodded across the ravine. "Practice, looks like. Can you hear anything?" Nog listened for a few moments.
"Too far even for me," he said. "All I can hear is some shouts of encouragement from the wrestlers and the sizzling sound of the phasers when they hit the rock."
"I guess you can't tell if Sisana is in either group," Jake said, feeling disappointed.
"Sorry,"
Nog replied. He slipped down the slope and stretched his arms and legs.
"You know, what I can't figure out is why the Turnaways would want Dr. Bashir in the first place."
"Huh?" Jake asked.
"Think about it," Nog insisted. "They don't want what's-his-name, Carrick, to be a Vedic. All right, that's their privilege. I mean, the Federation never interferes in the politics of a planet anyway, as long as they're local and don't threaten other planets. So even if old Tykar wants to kill Carrick before this Vedic ceremony, that's a local concern. What are they going to do with Dr. Bashir? Have him take on Carrick as a patient and treat him to death?"
Jake turned that over in his mind. He'd been so worried about Dr. Bashir's safety that he had not even asked himself the questions that Nog was raising. His friend had a point. Although Bashir had concealed his true identity from Tykar, the Turnaway leader had to know that his captive was human. In this sector, that meant he must come from Deep Space Nine. Surely Tykar Antal must know that he had no need for a Starfleet hostage. Even if Tykar succeeded in assassinating a local religious leader, Starfleet could do nothing, not unless the Bajoran Council formally requested aid. And that was something the disorganized, squabbling council would not do. It made very little sense. Jake said slowly, "Maybe they want Dr. Bashir for something else. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the Vedic at all."
"Maybe," suggested Nog with a yawn. "Maybe Tykar's going into the spy business, and he needs a space falcon to show him the ropes."
Jake shook his head. "It doesn't seem funny anymore, Nog."
"Humor," said Nog. "It's a matter of opinion."
They had nothing to do but wait, and waiting was hard. Nog took over from Jake at twilight, and Jake tried to rest. He had no chance of going to sleep, of course, but his legs ached from the long trek down into the ravine, and he wanted the chance just to close his eyes for a few minutes. He quickly discovered that getting comfortable was impossible. The boulders were jagged and rough, and no matter how he leaned, a sharp little piece was sure to stick him in the back. He could not lie down on the sand because there simply wasn't enough sand here in their hiding place. He didn't dare move away from the spot either, because Susanna was returning here. Besides, in the gathering dusk, he was uncomfortably certain that he would get lost in no time. So he just sat there, shifting his weight and feeling miserable. Overhead, the sky grew dark and a few stars appeared. Looking up at them, Jake reflected that living out there in space was not so bad after all. Maybe Deep Space Nine could be dull at times, but his room was always comfortable at least. And there his father, the big reliable Commander Sisko, was in charge, and Jake didn't have all the worry and concern of trying to keep track of the wayward Dr. Bashir. It was strange, though, sitting here on a planet and wishing he were back on the station. Only a day earlier, he'd been on a station, wishing he were on the planet. Jake sighed. Life just wasn't fair, and that was all there was to it.
"Shh!"
hissed Nog from up above.
"Someone's coming!"
Jake sprang up, tensed his muscles.
"Where?"
he whispered.
"Coming through the path between the rock slides,"
Nog replied.
"Running."
After a moment, Nog spoke again, sounding relieved.
"It's okay. It's just Susanna."
Jake had been holding his breath. He let it out in a long sigh of relief. He expected her right away, but it was 5 more minutes before she came close enough for him to hear, and another minute before he saw her, a dark shape moving through the night. She came straight to them. "We have to move," she said. "They have a tracking field inside the compound, and I may have tripped it when I left. Follow me." Running after her was a nightmare for Jake. He stumbled, tripped, and stubbed his toes about a dozen times. They retreated to a place a kilometer or so up the canyon. Then Susanna asked Nog to listen for pursuit.
"Nothing,"
the Ferengi boy reported after a few seconds.
"I hope you brought us some food. I'm starving."
To Jake's surprise, Susanna had brought them food, some hard-packed fruit bread. The taste was sweet and tangy, and a little of it filled Jake up. They swallowed water to wash it down.
"Good,"
Nog said.
"What was that?"
"It's ration bread," Susanna told him. "Lots of calories, lots of energy. I have enough for one more meal for us all. But listen, I found out about Dr. Bashir." "You did?" Jake asked. He'd been feeling tired before Susanna showed up, but now he was ready for action. "What about him?" "He's in the camp all right," Susanna said. "There's a stone hut back from the other buildings, up near the fuel tanks. That's where they're keeping him." She lowered her voice and went on. "Everything is all confused in the camp. It turns out that Tykar Antal is in trouble. He has lost lots of his followers, and lots of the others want to leave the band now that the Cardassians have gone away. He's using this business of the new Vedic to draw more people in. That's lucky for us. I'd guess more than half the camp is made up of new recruits who don't know the rules yet, so it was easy for me to slip around." "Yes, but what about Dr. Bashir?" demanded Jake impatiently. "I'm coming to that," Susanna returned. "You have to understand a few things to begin with. First, Tykar plans to assassinate Carrick Maydal, but after Carrick is named Vedic, not before. He was terribly angry when he found out a young hothead had already made an attempt on Carrick's life. I think he's ordered that the young man be killed."
"What?"
Nog asked.
"When they both want the same thing?"
Jake said nothing. He remembered the grandfatherly Carrick Maydal leaning over the young man and saying, "I forgive you." He reflected that Bajorans were complicated people. On one side, you had the old man who could forgive his attacker. On the other, you had Tykar Antal, who could kill a man just as an example to others. Susanna was talking. "They don't really want the same thing," she was saying to Nog. "The assassin was just someone who was disappointed in the choice of Carrick Maydal. He wanted his own candidate to be named Vedic and to sit on the council. But Tykar wants Carrick dead just as a stepping stone to more power. He wants to control the council himself. Tykar wants to run all of Bajor." "What about Dr. Bashir?" Jake urged again. "I'm coming to that," insisted Susanna. "I heard some guards talking about him. I gather from what they said that someone at the landing field is a turnaway spy. He reported that Dr. Bashir was on his way the moment he left the space station. The Turnaways knew from the beginning who Dr. Bashir was and that he came from Deep Space Nine. That is why they need him, but the doctor is not cooperating. Tykar is very angry. He tried to bully Dr. Bashir into taking a delegation of Turnaways up to Deep Space Nine, but Dr. Bashir refused. So now Tykar is sent for his own doctor, a Bajoran Turnaway who specialized in torture back during the Cardassian occupation.
Torture?
Croaked Nog. Jake felt cold. What are they going to do to him? He asked. After a moment of silence, Sassana said, I'm not sure. I think they're going to drug him and then let him fly his shuttle back to Deep Space Nine. Does either of you know what a Vandalium device is?
No,
Nog said, but Jake knew. Suddenly he felt not only cold, but chilled to the bone. It's an outlawed device of war, he said, his voice shaking. It isn't an ordinary bomb. It explodes without any real destructive force. You could probably sit in a chair beside one when it went off, and the explosion would barely be great enough to knock the chair over.
And why do you sound so scared?
Nog asked, his own voice getting edgy. Because it destroys living tissue, Jake said. Think of a phaser set on highest power. When it hits a target, the target vanishes. The molecules just fly apart. Well, a Vandalium bomb is like that, but all that flies apart is living tissue, flesh and bone and blood. Even a small Vandalium bomb could destroy every living person within a 5-kilometer area. They would all vanish in puffs of steam along with all the animals and plants in the area. They're going to fly one of those up to Deep Space Nine, Sassana said. Jake closed his eyes. He could feel his heart pounding. He imagined the Einstein docking at Deep Space Nine. Before Dr. Bashir could even go through the airlock, a small hidden bomb would explode with hardly a noise. But Dr. Bashir would vanish, and Jadzia Dax, Keiko and Miles O'Brien, Quark, Major Kira, his own father, if he had returned by then, and more than 300 people aboard Deep Space Nine. Just momentary puffs of steam and they'd be gone. Then Deep Space Nine, intact and undamaged, would wait for the first to claim it. Jake had a feeling he knew who that first person would be. Tykar Antal. Haltingly, stammering a little, Jake tried to explain to the others just what a Vandalium bomb could do to Deep Space Nine. They need Dr. Bashir, he finished. The shuttle security interlocks will only accept his ID patterns. And since he is expected, I don't think anyone on Deep Space Nine would give the shuttle a thorough scan before he docks.
No, agreed Nog. They can't. I overrode the circuits, remember? That's how we were going to get back undetected.
Jake almost groaned aloud. It wasn't just one Bajoran religious leader whose life was in peril. Everyone on Deep Space Nine was in danger. The three of them had to find some way to stop Tykar's plan. But what could 3 kids do against Tykar Antal's army? Jake did not know. Grimly, though, he realized that they would have to try. Chapter 8. Jake studied the sketch that Sassana had drawn in the sand. The prison hut is here, she said, touching a square with the tip of the rock she'd used to mark the diagram. There are 2 guards at the door, no windows. Jake took a deep breath. The prison hut lay on the far side of the ravine, halfway up a gentle slope. Behind the hut were a couple of fuel tanks. Behind them was a sheer cliff face. There would be nowhere to hide once anyone got well inside the camp, and to get to the hut, a person would have to go right through the camp. It looked hopeless. Reluctantly, Jake said, I think we will have to ask for help after all.
Good.
Nog stood up and brushed the sand off his trousers.
Let's get started right away and...
Not us, Nog, Jake said. He turned to Sassana. You'll have to go back to town. Tell your father what's happening out here, and get him to notify the authorities. Maybe some of the monks will help. After all, Tykar is trying to assassinate New Vedic, and... I'm not going back, protested Sassana. You've got to, Jake insisted. Sassana crossed her arms. And what will you and Nog do while I'm gone? We'll try to get the doctor out of camp, Jake said.
Are you crazy? Asked Nog. They have a whole army in there.
I know, Jake said, but their army is half new and almost untrained, and from what Sassana has told us, no one has found the rebel camp in years. They won't be expecting anyone to make a rescue attempt. I'll bet the guards are there just to keep Dr. Bashir from getting out, not to keep anyone else from getting in. You'll be taken on the spot, Sasana told them. Tykar's army has no humans or Ferengi in it. I can get by because I'm just another Bajoran face, but you?
Good point, said Nog. Well, it's hopeless. Let's go.
Hold on, Nog, Jake said. He was tired and grouchy. He stood up, feeling the coarse sand crunch beneath his feet. Someone has to stay and try to rescue the doctor before they can drug him. If Tykar is going to let him die anyway when the Vandalium bomb goes off, there's no telling what kind of drug they might give him. We have to try to get him out. Then let me stay and try to get to him, Sasana said. You can go back and tell the authorities.
That makes sense, said
Nog. With a faint note of hope in his voice, he added,
Doesn't it make sense to you, Jake?
Sure, Jake said. Only there's this one little matter. Nog, can you find your way back to Sakilo?
Of course!
Nog sounded indignant.
A Ferengi has an unerring sense of direction.
All right, Jake said. What direction is Sakilo City from here? Nog pointed. Jake glanced at Sasana. She shook her head and pointed in an entirely different direction. Jake said, There you are. You and I couldn't find our way back to the city. Only Sasana can. So she has to go, and we have to stay. They argued some more, but in the end, Sasana had to admit that Jake was right. She was the only one who could go back to the city for help. She left them, moving silently away in the gathering darkness of the short summer night.
I hate this,
muttered Nog. I'm not crazy about it myself, Jake replied. What we need is a plan.
What we need is a diversion,
Nog said. Jake nodded. It's a good idea.
Of course it is. One of the rules of acquisition is that the greater amount you are taking from someone, the greater the distraction must be.
Nog made a depressed clicking sound with his tongue.
I figure that we need a distraction about the size of a landquake. Any ideas?
Jake had to admit he had none. They explored a little under the cover of darkness, and they found that they could climb the rock slide all the way up to the lip of the ravine here. The turnaway camp had become a field of dark building and tent shapes dotted with the orange glows of cooking fires. It was a little startling to see just where the cloaking device cast its cover over the camp. 1 second, Jake could see the fires clearly. When he took another step up the slope, half of them disappeared under the cloak. Another couple of steps, and they were all gone. Jake slipped, and a small rock clattered away under his feet.
Quiet,
pleaded Nog.
They may have electronic ears out.
Then they'd hear you for sure, Jake said with a grunt. The small stone rattled to a stop somewhere down the slope. An idea began to form in Jake's mind then. Hey, he said, I think you were right, Nog. The ideal diversion would be a landquake.
Great, Nog said. How do we start one? I'm not well acquainted with Federation techniques of destabilizing a planet's core.
Not a real landquake, Jake said, but a landslide. We can manage that with a few well-placed boulders. Nog caught on immediately.
The rim of the rip has lots of rocky spots where we could pry loose some big stones, he said. If we sent 2 or 3 of those down, that might start an avalanche.
At least they'd get the attention of everyone in the camp, Jake replied. And small rock slides must happen often here. They might not even think someone started it.
But they'd have to investigate, Nog said, because even a natural rock slide could destroy the camp, or part of it anyway. Okay, let's go.
They climbed up to the edge of the rip and carefully picked their way along the edge. Fortunately, the summer glow lingered on the horizon, giving them enough light to see the likely spots. Jake found a place which had to be over part of the camp. It looked ideal. Erosion had loosened a cluster of 4 or 5 large boulders there. The lower, larger ones were far too big for Jake and Nog to move, but the few on the top were smaller. If the boys could start them rolling, they would very likely knock loose at least a couple of the bigger stones, and once those started, an alarming rock slide would surely result. For about an hour, Jake and Nog labored over the most likely stone, chipping away at the pebbles and soil that held the boulder in place. Finally, the rock was so loose that Nog could easily push it over the edge of the rip. You'll have to wait until I can get back down into the ravine, Jake said, panting. using a rough stone as a chisel, had blistered his hands, and his mouth was dry. "Give me about another hour, and then send the rock over."
"Go,"
said Nog in a weary voice.
"I'll meet you at the top of the big rock slide, if we live long enough to meet."
The climb down was harder than the climb up, because the sky had grown darker, and because Jake had to be careful to watch his step. It wouldn't do to slip and start a rock slide here, especially since Jake did not know how close any guards might be or what sensors they might be using. Still, Jake reached the rip floor in plenty of time. He stealthily picked his way across the jumble of stones at the bottom, getting as close as he dared to the entrance. Minutes crawled by. From here, Jake could see the campfires again, and a breeze brought him the smell of burning wood and of cooking food. He could also hear faint voices, although they were so far away that he could not understand what they were saying. After he had waited so long that he felt like an aching statue crouched behind a boulder, Jake was almost ready to believe that something had gone wrong. What if the Turnaways had patrols up on the edge of the rip? What if they had captured Nog? What if they knew already that he was out here? And what if they should send a squad armed with phasers to search for him? What if... Crash! The sound of a huge rock bounding down the side of the rip somewhere up ahead yanked Jake out of his worried thoughts. Then with a roar and a clatter, more stones fell. Jake heard shouts of alarm coming from the camp, and he set off at a trot, bending low and trying to keep boulders between him and any watchers. As he got closer, Jake could hear what the Turnaways were shouting. "Another fall! Get away from the cliff!" And, "We need some help over here! Quick! One of the huts is blocked!" All the rest was confusion, shouts, and curses, and the hubbub of lots of people caught by surprise. Jake finally came right up to the entrance. He could see now that the camp had a kind of dry moat around it, feeding into the central drainage channel. A metal drawbridge lay across it, but the guards fortunately had not drawn it up. Even better, the guards had apparently run to help the Turnaways who'd been trapped in a hut by the slide. Jake hurried across it, hoping that no detection device was going off. He blundered right into a couple of Bajorans who were carrying spades and pickaxes. "Watch it!" one of them growled at him in the dark. Jake ducked around to the rear of the first line of tents and huts. He closed his eyes and remembered where Susanna had said the prison hut was. It should be a little ahead of him and off to the left between two large cylindrical tanks. It was still very dark, but the cooking fires near the central drainage channel gave some light. Looking up, Jake could see the stars, but they wavered and danced in an odd way. He realized he was looking through the cloaking device that kept the camp safe. He only wished it gave a little illumination. He came to the first tank, as big as a house and made of rusty metal. Jake flattened himself against it and crept around the curve. Yes, there was a hut ahead, and it was unguarded. He dashed to it and tried the door. It clanked, and he bent close to see a primitive padlock. "Who's there?" asked a sharp voice from inside. Jake recognized the speaker at once, Dr. Bashir. "Me, Jake Sisko," he called back as loudly as he dared. "I'm going to get you out. Wait a second." Jake felt around in the dark. Large stones were plentiful, and he picked up one half the size of his head. He pounded at the lock with this, making sparks fly. The first attempt was a failure, and Jake was almost afraid to try again. And then he heard the noise of another rock slide over across the way. He grinned. Nog was outdoing himself. In the resulting confusion, Jake hammered away at the lock, sometimes hitting it, sometimes missing it, once skinning his finger badly. At last it gave way with a sharp spring. Jake shoved the door open. Dr. Bashir, rumpled and unshaven, stood just inside, his face showing confusion in the wavering light of an antique oil lamp. "Jake?" he exclaimed. "How did you even find me? Who else has come?" "Just Nog," Jake said. "Let's hurry. They may notice something going on at any minute." "Right," the doctor said. They paused a moment in the doorway, and when the coast looked clear, both of them dashed out and through the night. Both Jake and Dr. Bashir stumbled and slipped, and once Jake ran right into the corner of a small hut that he could not see in the darkness. But somehow or other, they made it all the way to the last tent. Just ahead lay the metal bridge, and coming across it was a group of 6 Bajorans, 3 of them carrying torches. 2 of them held on to a struggling, writhing figure. "Oh, no," said Jake with a groan. Their plan had succeeded, but only partially. Dr. Bashir was out of captivity, but now the Turnaways had captured Nog.